Welcome back to another Messed Up Mangas. So today we're talking about one of the more infamous messed up manga series, messed up manga stories, Ichi the Killer. It's a banger for all the wrong reasons. I guess is how I would describe it, right? So this one is pretty well known among people that search for like the most extreme or like disturbing stories, series, manga, and that kind of stuff. And there was actually a live action movie that came out of this series, which was, it's interesting, right? Because the violence is there, but it's taken to like this over the top level, right? Where I feel like it's so ridiculous to see this in live action, right? That like it almost has like this sort of like dark comedy hint to it when you look at the live action movie versus the manga, which is like sincerely like dark and just atmospheric, and like it has two very different vibes to it, right? But we're talking about the manga. So the manga tells the tale, right? Our two main characters, we have Kakihara, who is considered the ultimate masochist, right? Like he derives great pleasure from having pain inflicted upon him. Like it's a sexually gratifying experience, and one of if not his greatest hope in life is to find somebody that can inflict the ultimate pain upon him, right? To give him so much pain, fear, and just all of those emotions to satisfy him sexually and have the ultimate orgasm. That's this guy's thing. And if that's one of your main characters, like you already know things are off to a great start, right? So we got Kakihara over here, and on the other hand we have the titular character, right? We have Ichi. Now Ichi is the ultimate, we'll call him the ultimate sadist, right? He's a hell of a character, and like this is one thing that I will say about this story, right, is that it's known for like the gore and like the over the top like brutality of like the killing scenes and stuff like that, right? But the actual two main characters are like pretty complex and like their neuroses, I guess, like their mental health problems, because Ichi's thing, right, is that he enjoys inflicting pain upon people while simultaneously feeling like extreme guilt about it. So he kind of he has like a psychotic split that happens in his head almost, right? Where like Ichi's a sick fuck. Like let's just get that out there, man. There's no making excuses for this guy. It's like I can't. I'll put some scenes in here, but like he literally, like when he's at a crime scene performing these assassinations, because that's basically the plot line of this, right? That Ichi's an assassin that gets hired by this other guy, only known as Gigi, who's like behind the scenes manipulating things, and he's kind of like the puppet master of this whole plot. But he gives Ichi these hits, and then in return Ichi gets to take out his like sadist tendencies and stuff, and like he's very good at what he does. He runs around in like this weird jumpsuit with the number 1 on the back, Ichi, and he has like these blades on his legs that he uses to kill, right? Like because he performs like kicks and is like a martial artist, and that's how he gets the job done. So for Ichi, for him, he's weird because it's not like he just goes to like a crime scene, right? And he's like, yes, I get to kill and bathe in the blood of my enemies. Like he's not like the typical like super evil villain that we get used to in some of these stories, right? With him, he's like this really lame, weird, awkward guy like most of the time. But what ends up happening, right, is that like he's not mentally well, like he's mentally ill. So like he has all of this trauma that's basically built up from like his time like being bullied in school and all these other things, and being picked on for being a weirdo basically, right? And the story like makes it a point to blur the lines between like what's real and like what's Ichi's imagination, where like some of these things like I'm sure actually did happen, right? But there are other things that Ichi talks about, or like when he goes into this mode of like where he's big hurt, right? He goes into big victim mode is what we're gonna call it. Ichi goes into big victim mode. You really have to start to question, like, did somebody actually do this to him? Like, did this really happen, or is this guy just tripping and doing this so he can make an excuse to brutally kill this person, because that's what it becomes, right? Like in his head, the way that he's capable of like inflicting these killings upon people is that he first has to justify it in his head that this person deserves it or they want me to do it, right? And this doesn't just go for killing, man. He's also a sexual predator. Like, you know, like he goes up and like he legitimately like gets off on like both the women and men that he kills, and he makes sure to leaves plenty of semen at the crime scene. He's a great guy. He's a super great guy. But that's kind of what I wanted to get across with this series, man, is that like even outside of just like what people came for, you know, like the body dysmorphia and just like the torture scenes and all that kind of stuff, the story here and like the interactions between these two characters and like what's going on with them psychologically is actually very entertaining in of itself. And like the author created some very complex characters, man, like some characters with some weird nuances. You know, it's not just like the typical bad guys we see that have like these evil motivations where like I kill just to kill or like yada yada yada. Like they're pretty evil, don't get me wrong, but their reasoning for it is different. And let's talk about some of the more brutal scenes, right? So one of the two characters that stick out most in my mind, besides like our two main characters, right, are these two twins. Oh, they're pieces of shit, dude. I hated these characters. I remember the first time I read it, there's these two twins, right, that like they actually, like they used to be triplets. It gets revealed, but then they actually killed one of their brothers. It's like they're fucked up, dude. But basically like they're in constant competition with one another, you know. But instead of like playing sports or like finding a normal hobby, they basically end up like they're in the criminal underworld. So they're like, who can kill this person the best? Who can kill the most people? And like there's this torture scene with these guys, right, that is just, dude, it's beyond fucked. Like one, I'll just give you guys like an example of one, right, where like they have one of a rival like assassination group or whatever you want to call him, one of Gigi's hitmen, pretty much. They take him in, and Kakihara gives one of the twins the order, like, hey, do whatever you want to this guy, but don't kill him. And he's like, hey, I got a couple of ideas. So one of the twins, like at a crime scene, right, they find this guy who basically had like his face like smushed in, or like the way his neck was cranked, right? The way his neck was cranked was like, this would take inhuman strength. Nobody's like strong enough to do this. And then like one of the twins prides himself on being this big buff strong man, and like hearing his brother and other people say that like it's not humanly possible, and like whoever did this must be the strongest guy ever. He puts in his head, he's like, he's not the strongest guy ever, I'm the strongest guy ever. And so he goes to that guy that they have bound and tortured and stuff, right? And he's like, hey, do you think that it's possible to pull off a person's arm with just pure strength? And the guy looks at him like, what? No, you can't do that. And then the guy like reaches his hands onto the guy's arm. He's like putting his fingers in there, and then like his arm starts bleeding. You're like, oh my God. And then he's working on yanking this guy's arm off, just like tearing. Oh, it's so bad, dude. And like the worst part of it, right, is that like we see everything, you know, going back to what we said about Shigarui, right? Death Frenzy, how like most other manga, like you get a glimpse or like a preview, or just kind of it's implied how terrible something is. Ichi the Killer is one of those, like, I mean, yeah, like we're gonna apply how terrible it is, but let's also show you what's actually going on. What's actually going on here, you know? And it's, for me, the torture scenes with the twins has some of the most fucked up crap that this manga has to offer, man. Like there's literally the scene with like scissors being used where they shouldn't be. Is people who've seen it know it's not great, dude. Like scissors, man. Oh, I'm getting sick thinking about it. I'm getting sick, but it's just like I don't want to think about that. That's terrible, man. That's gross. So now that we talked a little bit about some of the most effed up scenes in my head and everything, let's just go back to like the themes, this plot, and like why I think you guys should read it. So outside of just being like a gore head or a person with more like morbid curiosity and that kind of stuff, one thing that this manga has to offer, man, is a look at some at some actually interesting themes that I wouldn't come to expect out of a story like this. And it shows how dangerous people that live in their own world are, you know, like people that are divorced from reality. Because that's the thing with Ichi, right, is that his whole character is based around the fact that he's able to justify the horrible things that he does to people, because he's like, oh, but like, oh yeah, I remember getting bullied in the past, and like this is what these people did to me, so these bad guys are like those people that bullied me, so like I can cut their jugular and masturbate on their corpse. Like, it's a jump in logic, right? But that it's the author's way of showing, man, how easy it is for us to do some pretty heinous and awful things to a person when we live in like this fantasy land that we created in our own head, and we learn to justify our actions through that. You know, like when we're divorced from reality, when we're no longer thinking about how other people feel, what's actually going on, what clues are they telling me, how are they communicating with me, when all of that goes out the window and we get solely focused on like our own pain, our own feelings, our own memories, it goes to show, in a very extreme case, right, how dangerous of a person we can potentially become when we live and do things like that, right? So that was a surprise for me. Like, I didn't really reflect on that too much when I was younger, because I was just like too caught up in some of the effed up scenes. But like looking back at the themes and stuff, I noticed that, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty damn cool. And it's a really good point, because you can become an absolutely heinous and terrible person if you live in your own head, you know, like if you are going by the rules of like your own fantasies and everything that's going on, and you're divorced from reality, you become a dangerous person. And also death, right? It has I don't want to spoil anything, but it has a look at like how even the most awful or just like masochistic people and things like that, when faced with like the reality of like what death is, no matter like how bad you're feeling at that moment or like what you think you want, death is always terrifying, because it's an unknown, you know, like it's something that our brain cannot mentally comprehend, because it's like it's nothingness, you know, like it's a lack of consciousness. There's no way that we can actually like know what death is or what death is like. So when we're faced with that possibility of us actually like, this is a real possibility for me to get killed right here, it shows how terrifying a prospect that is, and even how even the most hardened criminals and hardened hearts out there can become very soft and undignified in the face of death. So Ichi the Killer, right? Talked about some of the most messed up scenes, got into some of the characters. I think it's a decent read if you can stomach it. That's the thing. It's not going to be for everybody, just like everything we're going to be talking about in this series. It's not for everybody, but I do think that there's something there for people with a morbid curiosity, people that like dark manga with dark themes, people that want an interesting like character study into the psychology of horrible people. It's got some stuff there for you. So check it out if you're feeling up for it, man. That'll end it for our quick review / analysis of Ichi the Killer. In the comments, if you guys know of any other messed up stories or stuff that you want me to make a video on, or stuff you want to know if I've read it already, hit me up, man. Let's communicate. I'm always up for learning more about messed up stories. So that being said, see you guys later. Hope to see you in the next video.